In Clarke's Latin 1, and now the first 5 chapters of Clarke's Latin 2, we have encountered a number of verbs and a number of verb properties. We know that verbs have a number, singular or plural, depending whether there's one person or more than one person. We know that they have a person. First, about oneself, second, for addressing, and third, demonstrative, for pointing, he, she, it, or they, people who are over there. We know too that verbs have tenses. There's a total of 6 tenses, and we've met 3 of them so far. The present tense, taking place now, at this point in time. The future tense, yet to come, actions that will take place at a later stage. And the imperfect, one of 3 past tenses. The imperfect is for continuous or uncompleted past action. Something was going on in the past. The final property we've encountered is mood. The indicative mood is for factual statements, while the imperative mood is for orders, giving instructions. Let's begin by filling in the endings of the present tense. These should by now be pretty familiar, I hope. OST, mus, tis, unt, which, as we learnt right at the beginning of Clarke's Latin 1, chapter 1, correspond to the English I, you, he, she, it, we, you, and they. The future tense, a little more complicated to remember because the vowels change. It begins with an O, like so, then switches over to an I for the next 4 forms, and ends with a U. Bo, bis, bit, bimus, bitis, and bunt. The imperfect, however, is a little more user-friendly because it keeps the same A throughout its 6 forms. Bam, bas, bat, barmus, batis, and bat. And I shall squeeze in the meanings down the bottom of the table in a different colour. The present tense is happening now at this point in time, so I'm just going to put I something or I am something in. Of course, this am would change to are or is, depending who's carrying out the action. The future tense, of course, will something, an action that has yet to take place, while the imperfect is was or were doing. Occasionally, the imperfect can be translated as I began to or I used to, but that's fairly unusual. By far and away, the most common meaning is was or were carrying out an action continuously in the past. Let's fill in the numbers and the persons as well. As I mentioned before, we have 3 persons, first, second and third, which are repeated in the plural. 2 numbers multiplied by 3 persons gives us the total of 6 endings per verb tense. Now, we have also encountered 2 categories or conjugations of verbs. First conjugation verbs end in O in their present tense in the first person singular, and their stems change that O to A. And I'm going to put the stems up here. So the verb amo, I love, is first conjugation. It therefore has a verb stem ending in A, like so. Second conjugation verbs, meanwhile, end in eo, Teletubby verbs, and they form their stems by removing the O at the end. So mon-eo, I warn or advise, loses the O to become mon-e. So all of these various verb endings are added onto either of these verb stems. Just one very minor point to note, the A of first conjugation verbs disappears here before the first person singular of the present tense. Other than that, first conjugation verb stems always end in A, and second conjugation ones in E. It is those vowel stems that allow us to categorise verbs into different conjugations. Now, as I've mentioned already, the indicative mood is for factual statements, while the imperative mood is for orders, giving instructions. Now, if I put the first and the second conjugations here, there are two possible endings in each category. One for singular, that's ordering one person to do something, and another one for plural, ordering multiple people to do something. Now, the first conjugation imperatives end in are and arte, respectively. Therefore, the second conjugation ones, following the same logical pattern as here, goes and ete. Arte, ete. And all of those endings give orders or instructions. So I am just going to put an exclamation mark to symbolise giving an order. So, there we have it. The present, future and imperfect tenses of the first and second verb conjugations, along with their corresponding imperative forms. Now let's have a quick look at the 5 examples over here. Laborabant. Bambas bat, barmus batis bant. It's third person plural in the imperfect tense, so they are the ones carrying out the action. They were carrying it out in the past, so this is going to mean they were working. A continuous past action. We could, for the sake of good English, translate it as they worked, but we should always be mindful of its literal sense. Now, ridebo, a second conjugation verb this time, with a bo ending. That makes it first person singular of the future tense, so I am carrying out the action, I will carry out the action at some point in the future, and the action in question, rideo, I laugh or I smile. I will laugh. Delent, another second conjugation verb, this time a simple present, ost mustis unt, so they destroy. Or they are destroying, either would be correct. Finally, 2 more imperative forms. Oppugnate, it's a first conjugation verb, and the imperative is plural, clearly multiple people are being told to attack. And so when we do a word like this in a verb exercise, we do tend to specify in brackets whether it's singular or plural. And finally, manne. From moneo, I stay or remain, it's in the singular. Stay, and then sg in brackets for singular. Now, any verb in the first conjugation, like oppugno, neco, or whatever, will follow the same pattern as amo. And likewise, any second conjugation verb, timeo, I am afraid, terio, I frighten, delio, I destroy, will follow the same patterns as moneo. We do, however, have a number of verbs in Latin which are irregular in their forms. This means that they don't follow the normal patterns of the first or the second conjugation. Instead, they have their own weird and wacky forms. Now, unlike French and Spanish, which has a very large number of irregular verbs in their present tenses, verbs that are peculiar in the present, Latin has comparatively few. And so far, we've only encountered one such verb, and that is sum, the Latin for I am, the so-called verb to be. And I think it's important that we quickly go over its forms. Now, like any other verb, it has 2 numbers and 6 persons, but its present tense is pretty peculiar. It goes sum, es, est, sumus, estis, sunt. I am, you are, he or she or it is, we are, you plural are, and they are. Now, the future and the imperfect forms are also irregular, but they are going to look a bit more familiar to us, because in fact, they are simply bo bis bit and bam bas bat, but instead of a B, we have the letters ER. So bo bis bit bimus bitis bunt, which we normally have in the future, has become ero, eris, erit, erimus, eritis, and erunt. And likewise, we can apply the same logic to bam bas bat, barmus, bartis, bant, which becomes iram, iras, erat, eramus, eratis, and erant. And the tenses have the same meaning that they did before. So where sum is I am, now, in the present, ero, the future, I will be, at a later stage, and eram, I was, in the past. Now, like the other ordinary verbs that we've met, the verb to be has imperative forms, which are es in the singular and este in the plural, be. One final note, sum eis est, sumus estis sunt may look a little strange from an English perspective, but if you've learned French or Spanish and know the verb to be in those languages, you should be able to see je suis, tu es, il est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont. There are some quite striking similarities, as ever, between the languages.